Hey, YouTube, this is Pastor Access again. We're going in the book of Revelation, chapter 21. We're continuing on looking at the New Jerusalem and God's promise to us what it's going to be like in eternity and how awesome that's going to be. It's going to be great to be there for eternity all the time and for everything to be so just amazing continually. There's so many good things that God shows us in this study of things to look forward to. And I love going through this, and I hope you enjoy it as well. I'm going to continue reading in verse 19, which is where we left off last week in our Sunday school lessons. It starts, the foundations of the city wall were adorned with every kind of precious stone. The first foundation, jasper, the second, sapphire, the third, chalcedony, the fourth, emerald, the fifth, sardonyx, the sixth, carnelian, the seventh, chrysolite, the eighth, beryl, the ninth, topaz, the 10th, chrysoprase, the 11th, jacinth, and the 12th, amethyst. You know, as you look at these stones, or these stones that it goes through, it's important to realize that these are not the foundations of the New Jerusalem are not made of these stones. Instead, the foundations are adorned with these stones, which means they're like decorative of the foundations. We don't know specifically what materials the foundations are composed of. We do know that they're named after the 12 apostles, but we don't know exactly what they're made of. And so, but we do know they'll be beautiful because they'll be adorned with these amazing stones and how God does that. And then you think about what that means, because of course there's 12 different stones, just like the 12 apostles, just like the 12 tribes of Israel. That word 12 comes up over and over again in the New Jerusalem. And you look at the stones and what they may represent specifically, and it's difficult biblically to find a parallel to these stones other than the fact that the high priest in the Old Testament, the one that used to make the sacrifice and once a year in the Day of Atonement and all the things that the high priest did, he wore 12 stones as well. Now, to find the parallel and exactly why the foundations would be decorated the same way that the high priest was, it is difficult to really discern, and it's hard to find a real honest, meaning in that. But at the same hand, we do know that when God does this and He decorates these foundations, He's doing it to make the New Jerusalem beautiful and to make it awe-inspiring and something that is just jaw-dropping and something that we have never experienced anything anywhere close to it. And that's the way He wants the New Jerusalem to feel, just an amazing place to be. As we go on, it says, verse 21, the 12 gates are 12 pearls. Each individual gate was made of a single pearl. And as you think about that, the pearly gates, which is what people refer to it often as, give you kind of the notion or the sense that there is more than one pearl or a whole bunch of pearls that make up these gates. But actually the Bible says it's one pearl. So it's this huge, massive pearl that makes up the gates in the New Jerusalem, makes up each one. Each one has its own pearl. And the question is what kind of oyster was the kind that made this pearl? How big did this oyster have to be? And I think it's more likely that instead of God using an oyster to create these gates, that He probably just spoke it into existence and just made the pearl. God didn't have to have an oyster. He can make a pearl without that, and He can make it any size He wants to. And so He does that in this passage and creates an amazing sight with these gates. It's important to know, too, that, just as pearls are very valuable today, they were also very valuable during the time of the writing of this book. And so there was to have a huge, massive pearl the size of a gate would have incalculable wealth or value, I guess is the better word. Just be worth so much to have something that amazing. And so that's really what God's doing over and over again in the New Jerusalem, whether it's the streets of gold that are clear because the purity is so high, or whether it's the foundations that are adorned with all these precious stones, all the different things that are there. Everything is just jaw-dropping, amazing, much more than anything we'd find here on earth. And so that's what God's trying to do here. And the verse continues on, says it again, says the broad street of the city was pure gold like transparent glass. And so we know the gold is like transparent glass, but here it lets us know that there's like a main street in the New Jerusalem, and it's a broad street, probably very wide, and it's 100% this transparent gold that's so pure, and probably very heavy too because of the purity of it. Verse 22 says, "I did not see a sanctuary in it, because the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb are its sanctuary." The city does not need the sun or moon to shine on it, because God's glory illuminates it, and its lamp is the Lamb. And as you look at here, that word sanctuary is really referring to the temple. And so there's not going to be a temple in the New Jerusalem, which is very interesting, because since the fall of man, and since God, called the 12 tribes of Israel, Abraham's descendants, Jacob's children specifically, since then there's been a need for a tabernacle, and then multiple different temples. And the only time that we haven't had a temple since they left, the Israelites left Egypt, has been during the church age. And that's been since AD 70 all the way up until the tribulation. There's no temple other than the one, of course, that's in heaven. And so, but otherwise, there's always been a need for a temple, even in the millennial kingdom, which, of course, that doesn't seem to be during the millennial kingdom, at least for the first chunk, most of it. There's no sin, doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be death and those things. And Jesus is going to reign here on earth. So if you think if Jesus is on earth, why would you need a temple then? But then in the New Jerusalem, there's not a temple. And the only thing that is different in all these situations is God the Father is physically present here at the New Jerusalem. Whereas, of course, there's his manifest presence was there in the temple and in the tabernacle. And there were times that God's presence was there, but as far as him in a bodily form, God the Father present right there on his throne, the only time you see that is in the New Jerusalem or in heaven. But the temple ceases to exist at that point. It's as if it's like the finality or the perfect setting that God creates. To where him and his son are illuminating the earth, and it's what God has finally intended, and so he decides to not have a temple anymore. Everything is perfect, and so we see that there without having a temple. It also says, of course, there's no sun or moon to shine on it, because God's glory illuminates it, and its lamp is the Lamb. If you look in John chapter 1, and it talks about darkness and how Jesus is the light of the world, and how the light overcomes the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome the light. And John goes into detail talking about that. And darkness represents sin and evil in the world. And so here, heaven, not only are God the Father and Jesus so amazing and so powerful, so illuminating, that everything is bright from their presence, but also because there's no sin, and light has overcome darkness. And so the absence of sin also eliminates darkness as well, but it's spiritually as well, as that illustration goes through. And so you see that completed at the New Jerusalem. It says, the nations will walk in its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And that is referring to, as we know from earlier in Revelation and now, this is referring to kings that were believers in Jesus. There's not going to be any kings that are there that are not believers in Jesus, because there's not going to be any people who are non-believers in the New Jerusalem. And it says that again right after this. And so we know that it's not referring to some type of universalism where all people go to heaven, which some people have claimed, oh, well, look, the kings of the world and the nations of the world are coming in the New Jerusalem. That must mean everybody goes to heaven. No, that's not the case, because it talks about only those that are in the Lamb's Book of Life that are there. And the Great White Throne Judgment also eliminates those, or sends those to the lake of fire, whose names are not in the Lamb's Book of Life. It also says, each day its gates will never close, because it will never be night there. Referring to, again, there's no more darkness. They will bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. So that's saying there will be people from every tribe and every nation in the New Jerusalem. And God's glory will be there for them to have as well. Nothing profane will ever enter it, ever. No one who does what is vile or false, but only those written in the Lamb's book of life. And so God has chosen at this point to not allow there to be any more decisions made for or against him in the New Jerusalem. And those souls that are there, those people that are there, they're permanently there. They cannot fall anymore. And there are no additional folks that will be added to this. There will be no more children born in heaven. There will be no more sin. There won't be any choice with that. It will be everyone permanently in heaven, and almost as if everyone's eternity is frozen at that point. It's totally determined. Nothing else changes at that point. So I'm going to end this video here right now, and then we'll go into chapter 22 and part 2 of the New Jerusalem videos as we're doing this. I encourage you to share this video. There's a lot of views that are happening with these videos, and that's great because it means the gospel's going out. But in order for it to get past the people that are in immediate contact with these videos right now watching it, it needs to be shared to get beyond that. And so I encourage you to share this video if you get a chance. Share it on Facebook or whatever, and that way the gospel can continue to spread through these videos. I think that's God's desire and why he's prompted me to do these things. And so I encourage you to do that, and to definitely stay tuned for part 2 as we continue on. We still have 5 more verses in chapter 22 to go through. And so I'll see you there.